Hi everyone and welcome to the Football Analyst. Today we're going to take a look at Arsenal FC by focusing on their recent 4-1 win against Tottenham in the Premier League. So a few things we're going to be looking at are their structured forward press, which really dominated Tottenham, particularly in the first half. Tottenham just couldn't find a way to break through. Merino and Eze's movement. So those two pretty much played up front and were very interchangeable with where they positioned themselves, which was difficult for Spurs to track. And we'll also take a quick look at Rice and Zubimendi's control of the game really from that defensive number 6 position. They really dominated the ball and really unlocked a lot of things for Arsenal as well. But without further ado, let's move on. So Mikel Arteta set up Arsenal in his favoured 4-2-3-1 system. So this lends itself to a solid defensive unit with the two DMs in front of the back four. So we can see here that Declan Rice and Zubimendi kind of position themselves as the two pivots. This gives them the ability to overload the midfield centrally and offers versatility with build-up play, with the two holding midfielders providing shorter options to play out and also coverage if a turnover occurs. Now, with Merino up front, it also offered Arsenal the flexibility to have him drop into these areas and almost create a box shape, the ever-popular box shape that Pep Guardiola really made popular and teams are trying to adapt as well. So, if you include Eze in that, really made it quite easy for Arsenal to overload the middle of the park, particularly against Tottenham, who were only playing sort of two midfielders in the centre in their 5-2-3 or 3-4-3 formation that they were playing. Offensively, though, in the final third, it does offer the Gunners a flat line of 5 against the opposition defence, with the fifth player joining the front four usually being one of the fullbacks. So in this kind of example, we've got Calafiori pushing up. He would come back from left back, obviously. Sometimes he would invert and Trossard would stay high. Or otherwise, Timber would push forward and Calafiori would stay back. Essentially, whoever the wing back was that was holding his position would form a back three with the two centre halves. So they also had the two pivots, of course, to create a good solid block of 5 players in case there was a turnover. So that's how they like to set up, but we'll move forward into the first thing we'd like to take a look at, which is their structured forward press and how they were able to really dominate Tottenham from inside their own half. So to combat Spurs' 2-4-1-3, let's say build-up, Arsenal opted to set up in a 4-1-4-1 press. The key part of the press is Zubimendi's aggressiveness to push up and mark Eze's man if Eze is needed to press the CB. So as we can see here, Merino would come up in the traditional striker spot, and oftentimes the ball would be played out to the right to Danzo as they look to do something on this right flank for Tottenham. However, Merino would obviously press that. Declan Rice is holding his man here, and Trossard would try and block play into Spence. I think that was on the right. And what it would mean is that the ball was reversed. And once the ball was to reverse, Merino would just move over and cut any play back. So they were forced to play down this side of the pitch. And it was really Zubimendi. Once Eze kind of commits to this player, Zubimendi fills in. Declan Rice shifts across. Trossard moves here. And you get that kind of chain effect where they just pick up the next man. And it made it very difficult for Tottenham to try and play anything else as they were relying on a lot of long balls to Richarlison, who was coming up against the two big defenders for Arsenal. And he's not quite that type of hold-up player. But we'll take a look at a couple of quick examples. So as we can see here, so the ball has just been rolled to, I think that's Romero there, but he quickly plays it back to the keeper, and once kind of that occurs, once it's reversed, Merino, obviously, he just puts on a bit of light pressure. He's really cutting any play back to the keeper, and Eze moves directly forward. We can see Zubimendi here is already picking up. I think that's Bentancur there, Rice is here picking up the other pivot. And Saka, of course, is down here picking up the fullback. Udogie, I believe. So once that's played, Eze puts immediate pressure on Van der Ven, and he really doesn't have many clear options to go to. So most centre-backs are not going to be comfortable taking on Eze in this situation. Obviously, playing back to the keeper presents risk with Merino there, and just stress that they don't really need. So he tries to play long and chip it over the top. Now, Zubimendi wasn't particularly guarding a man there. It was more space, but it did mean that the ball couldn't really be played in there because of Zubimendi's guarding that space. But with the chip play, because it's hanging in the air so much, it has meant that Timber can come across and cut that off. We can see that Saliba is keeping Richarlison contained, and Arsenal have got really good representation around the second ball here. Timber's dealing with it. He nods it quite comfortably down to Zubimendi, and they're able to get possession back. So that was common, particularly in the first half. Tottenham were left playing these long balls very often. It was almost like they were sucking them into thinking that there was space kind of between the midfield and the forwards and that they could play something into. But with Arsenal's big defenders, it really wasn't something that was ever on offer for Tottenham. The next example we're going to quickly look at, Danzo has the ball up in sort of the right back position. So that's been played across from the keeper. And once this kind of plays out, we'll see, once it's reversed, Merino again pushes across. So he's come across. Eze's kind of anticipating something. The ball will be played again to Van der Ven, and he will press this. We can see, I think it's Declan Rice this time. So Zubimendi and Declan Rice have swapped sides, but he won't actually pick anyone up, but it really doesn't matter as long as he's guarding the dangerous space. Van der Ven is going to look up and see that there's a big red shirt. Declan Rice is a big guy. He can cover a bit of ground. He can't really play anything into that. He's looking, his vision is seeing 1, 2, 3 red shirts right in front of him, and he just decides, as most defenders do, the best thing for the ball to be is away from goal as far as possible if I have to. He tries to pick something off, and I'll just play that again. So he tries to pick something off. Obviously, there's nothing there. He tries to play a ball between the lines, 2 feet. But as we can see, it's easily dealt with the centre-half coming up. I think that's Hincape. And just a bit of pressure on the forward and the ball trickles past. And that's enough for Arsenal to get the ball back. But that was really how they did it. They just waited for Tottenham to reverse the ball. And once they did that, just a bit of light pressure. When you're playing a 3 at the back, you do sacrifice another player in midfield. You're trying to play out wide. That's generally where your numbers are going to be. But with only the 2 midfielders, it's quite easy for a 3-man midfield to overload both defensively and offensively in that area and stop any play through. But we'll move on to the next thing we want to look at, which is Merino and Eze's movement. So these two were really interchangeable throughout the match. Merino started as a striker and Eze as the 10. But once we look at a few of their hotspots and things and examples, we'll see that was very fluid. So we'll move on to just our player map. So the best part about having Merino up front is that he can quickly identify and feel comfortable dropping into spaces in midfield to progress the ball, particularly against an opponent who is deciding to pull a player out of midfield and into a back 3. And this opens up plenty of opportunities for Arsenal to move Spurs shape around, to open up pockets for both Merino and Eze, or for them to move to overload certain areas of the pitch. Essentially, they played like 2 false nines despite having traditional starting positions, and warranted Spurs' 3 centre-backs irrelevant when transitioning up the field. It's no coincidence that both players played a part in the goals, particularly in the first half. So Arsenal are really committing all their numbers into the build-up phase, and essentially warranting these 3 defenders pretty much irrelevant with whatever press Tottenham were trying to employ. Generally, you like your centre-backs to pressure the forwards, but when Eze, the 10, and Merino, the 9, are coming so far deep in the midfield, Arsenal are quite easily able to create this box and create that overload against the 2 DMs of Tottenham because they've dragged a midfielder out to put down back. So that kind of conservative 3 at the back approach, you are sacrificing that central midfield sort of dominance. And we'll take a look at that in action. So this first example, we can see Eze is already down here. So he's down on the right flank. He's come across from here. And as this play unfolds, we'll see the ball is flicked around a bit. He leaves the space. And in a second, we will see Merino pop up just here. So he's come from the 9 position. He's come from quite a ways back. And he's just going to plonk himself into this space. And Rice notices this straight away. He's got his head up. And he simply just has to knock the ball between the lines to get it to Merino. And we can see just the vast space he's in, because Udogie, we can see Saka's foot here. Udogie's caught up with Saka, and 3 CBs don't want to commit too high up the field. So it has left this pocket here for Merino just to wander into. That's just typical false 9 kind of movement, just to drop into these pockets in between the lines. And I think Arsenal were really well coached for this game, and were really aware that this was going to be on offer for most of the game. Another quick example is just something to highlight, that when you play a back 5 and your 2 pivots are trying to cover all the central midfield options Arsenal have available, you're going to leave space on the weak side of the field for Eze and Merino to drop into. So this is just the lead up to the goal. So as we can see here, that's Merino, and this is Eze. So they're kind of sitting off the line. There's a bit of space between the 2 of them. Most strikers will probably try to position themselves here or here, try and hit the line, push them as far back as possible. But they're kind of sitting off because they're kind of playing that centre 40, false 9-ish type of thing, as I mentioned. And as the play unfolds, we can see the ball has kind of trickled through. Both Spurs DMs I've kind of pushed across. That's actually Van de Ven there. He's come up to try and provide extra cover. But we can see they've still got a back 4, which is fine. But it's 4-on-4 because we've got an Arsenal player here, here, and here. And we will find out in a second how easy it was for them just to flick it around. We can see Merino is just holding his space here. Eze puts a bit of pressure on the back line. And there's so much space here because the 2 pivots have really been dragged across, because Arsenal had a few numbers and almost a bit of an overload. They had to deal with that, and it's just left so much space on the weak side for Merino to receive. And, you know, here's enough time to swivel and find his man in Trossard and flick it over the top. You know, he's a midfielder. He's going to see those opportunities. So that's just the negative to playing with 2 in midfield. And we'll move on to another example. So this is just a quick example with the exact same scenario where Eze is the beneficiary in both his goals. And with this one, we can see Merino has come very high to offer an option. So he's come right up. And in a second, we will see Udogie try and cover that. So he's come right up Udogie to try and stop this. And just in this moment, we can see Timber. And I believe that is Zubimendi, goal side of this Tottenham player. And so the ball just really needs to be played, just knocked in front of them. Zubimendi's able to pick it up. And from there, they're able to knock it forward and score. We can see Eze is up here, and he will make a late charge and pretty much do what Merino did before. He will sit just off the the back line, and it's just not close enough for the back line to apply any real pressure with the defensive midfielders kind of caught up here. There's Bentancur. Van der Ven is having to deal with this. It just created a lot of chaos, and the Spurs shape was just all at sea. And that led to Eze's opening goal, which we will see here. So this is his next goal. So as we can see, the numbers again, just with the Spurs, just having to deal with just the sheer volume. Van der Ven is here. He's really not doing anything there. He's guarding anything that might come through here, but you've already got enough probably defenders. He really should be back here somewhat, so that maybe Romero can pick up Eze, or they can apply some pressure there, but it's all too easy for Arsenal just to bounce it across. Bit of a ricochet, but we can see just the space Eze has here. So just a lot of room. We can see how far back these defenders have been pushed just from a run from Rice from midfield. Trossard is kind of dangerous as well. We can see a late run. I think that's Calafiori. So they really pulled apart Spurs defence, particularly at the top of the box with their midfielders. And just we can see now just the space as they has to get that under control and push forward and score. So really easy for Arsenal to play into that really dangerous area of the field, which is just this kind of just off the back of the striker, really, and just off the defensive line. So I wonder if more teams will do that against Spurs back five, but it worked very well for Arsenal. Just quickly, we'll look at Merino's heat map. So as we can see, strikers' heat map, most of their hotspots will be kind of in this area. However, Merino's is all the way on this right flank, so he was clearly trying to overload that side of the field in order to progress build-up play. Very typical of a false nine. We can see there's not much there at all, actually, and yet he was playing striker, or at least started there. And then with Eze, we can see that he was actually the one pushing into these areas, so he was coming off from midfield, off the back line. And that's very difficult to pick up those kind of late runs. Every run was going to be a late run, and it's difficult for the defenders to track that. He also has a fair bit of his heat map here in the right flank, so they were clearly trying to overload this right side, and we can see just the sheer numbers of players. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the 10 outfield players are really over this right side. So that was a clear indication of where Arsenal were trying to target. But we'll move on just to the last point I want to touch on, which is Rice and Zubimendi's control of the game. And we won't look at any clips because I could really show multiple clips of just them recycling the ball when they're under pressure, being able to find a man, manoeuvring and manipulating Spurs' shape. So we'll just take a look at just their pass maps. I think this is enough to showcase the influence they had on the map. This is Zubimendi's. We can see just the sheer volume of passes, successful passes that he had. And then this is Rice's as well, all over the field for both of them. And then overlay both on top of each other. And we can just see how dominant they were across the field. Touches pretty much everywhere. Majority in this sort of central part of the field. If I change my ink color there so you can see, majority in this sort of central area, which is really where they dominated the field. That was where it was won, this central area from the edge of the box, not even in the half space, just in the center of the pitch, just where the Spurs were really vulnerable. So there you have it. A quick analysis on how Arsenal and Mikel Arteta really toyed with the Spurs, and surely this season is a season they go all the way, but time will tell. Again, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you would like to support the channel and help it grow, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more analysis, as this would be very much appreciated. As always, thanks for watching, and may your team be forever winning. Cheers.